The police car pulled into my driveway at exactly 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I know the exact time because I was drinking my coffee and watching Karen Martinez pace back and forth on the sidewalk like a caged animal, pointing at my fence and talking on her phone. "Yes, officer, it's a clear safety violation," she was saying loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. "The fence creates a visual obstruction that could cause accidents. Children could get hurt. Property values are already dropping because of this eyesore." I opened my front door and waved at Officer Johnson as he got out of his patrol car. "Morning, Jim." "Let me guess, fence complaint." "Morning, Dave. Sorry about this, but we got a call about a safety hazard on your property. Mind if I take a look?" I gestured toward the 6-foot wooden privacy fence I'd installed 3 weeks ago. "Be my guest." Though I'm curious what safety hazard Karen thinks she's found in a standard residential fence. Karen marched over like she was leading a military parade. She was wearing her usual HOA president uniform, navy blazer, clipboard, and that expression she got when she thought she was saving the world from people like me. "Officer Johnson, thank you for responding so quickly," she said, completely ignoring me. "As you can see, this fence violates multiple community safety standards. It blocks sight lines for drivers, creates hiding spots for criminals, and destroys the open aesthetic our neighborhood is known for." Officer Johnson walked along my fence line, checking the height and construction. "Ma'am, this appears to be a standard privacy fence. What specific safety violation are you reporting?" "It's too tall, too solid, and too close to the street corner. According to HOA regulations, corner lot fences cannot exceed 4 feet in height and must be at least 75% open for visibility." I almost choked on my coffee. "Karen, this fence is 6 feet from the street and meets every county building code. I have the permits right here." "County codes don't override HOA regulations," she snapped. "And your permits don't mean anything if they violate community standards." Officer Johnson looked between us like he was watching a tennis match. "Is there an actual safety issue here, or is this a neighborhood dispute?" "There's definitely a safety issue," Karen said, pulling out her tablet. "I've documented 17 potential hazards created by this fence. Blocked sight lines, pedestrian safety concerns, and decreased emergency vehicle access." "Emergency vehicle access?" I laughed. "Karen, it's a fence around my backyard. The fire department isn't planning to drive through my garden." "You're being deliberately obtuse," she said, using that tone she reserved for people she thought were too stupid to understand her genius. "This fence represents a fundamental disregard for community welfare and established safety protocols." Officer Johnson was clearly trying not to smile. "Ma'am, I've walked the entire perimeter. This fence doesn't block any sight lines, doesn't interfere with traffic, and appears to be legally installed. Is there something specific you'd like me to cite?" Karen's face was turning red. "Officer, are you familiar with HOA authority in residential communities? Because this fence violates Section 4.2 of our architectural guidelines." "Ma'am, I enforce county and state law. HOA disputes are civil matters that need to be resolved between neighbors or in court." "So you're refusing to enforce community safety standards?" "I'm telling you this fence doesn't violate any laws I'm authorized to enforce." That's when Karen made the mistake that would change everything. She pulled out her phone and called 911 while we were all standing there. "Yes, I need to report an officer who's refusing to enforce community safety violations. He's allowing a dangerous structure to remain in place despite clear evidence of public hazard." Officer Johnson's expression changed immediately. "Ma'am, you just filed a false police report. That's a misdemeanor offense." "False?" Karen's voice went up an octave. "There's nothing false about it. This fence is dangerous and you're refusing to do your job. Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Karen Martinez, the woman who had made my life hell for 3 years with her fake authority and made-up rules, was getting arrested on my front lawn. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I'm trying to protect this community. You're under arrest for filing a false police report and harassment. You have the right to remain silent." As Officer Johnson read Karen her rights, I stood there holding my coffee mug, watching 3 years of neighborhood tyranny come to an end in handcuffs. But let me back up and tell you how we got to this point, because Karen's arrest was just the beginning of the most satisfying month of my life. My name is David Chin, and I've lived at 1247 Maple Street for 8 years. It's a corner lot in a quiet subdivision called Brookhaven Hills. When I bought the house, there was no HOA. The neighborhood was just a collection of families who kept their yards neat and minded their own business. That changed 3 years ago when Karen Martinez moved in and decided our peaceful community needed her special brand of management. Karen was 52, recently divorced, and had apparently decided that controlling other people's lives was her new career. Within 6 months of moving in, she had convinced 4 other residents to form an HOA with her as president. The problem was, you can't just declare yourself the boss of an existing neighborhood. But Karen didn't let legal details stop her from acting like she owned the place. It started small. Friendly reminders about grass height and mailbox colors. Suggestions about holiday decorations and parking procedures. Most people ignored her, but a few residents were intimidated enough to go along with her demands. Then Karen got bolder. She started issuing fake fines for made-up violations. She created official-looking documents with HOA letterhead. She even convinced the local print shop to make her some business cards that said, Community Standards Coordinator. The first time she showed up at my door with one of her fake citations, I thought it was a joke. She was wearing a navy blazer and carrying a clipboard, looking like she was conducting a government inspection. Mr. Chin, I'm here to discuss your front yard landscaping, she announced. Your flower beds are not in compliance with community aesthetic standards. I looked at my perfectly normal flower beds, some roses, a few bushes, nothing unusual. What's wrong with them? The color scheme conflicts with the approved seasonal palette. Red flowers are prohibited during spring months according to Section 3.7 of the Landscape Guidelines. What landscape guidelines? Karen handed me a printed document that looked like it had been designed by a committee of bureaucrats. These were approved by the HOA board last month. All residents received notification. I never received any notification. And when did we get an HOA? The Brookhaven Hills Homeowners Association was formally established 18 months ago. All property owners in this subdivision are automatically members. That's not how HOAs work, Karen. You can't just declare an existing neighborhood part of your association. Actually, according to state law, any community can establish an HOA through majority consensus of resident property owners. Show me the votes. Karen's confident expression flickered for just a moment. The documentation is all filed with the county. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here to help you understand the importance of community compliance. She handed me a fine notice for $150, printed on official-looking paper with a fake seal. You have 14 days to address the landscaping violations or face additional penalties. I looked at the paper, then at Karen, then back at the paper. You're serious about this? Community standards exist for a reason, Mr. Chin. Property values, neighborhood harmony, and aesthetic integrity all depend on residents working together toward common goals. And if I don't pay this fake fine? It's not fake. It's a legitimate citation issued under HOA authority for documented violations of established guidelines. That night I did some research. I called the county records office, checked state laws about HOA formation, and even contacted a lawyer friend who specialized in property disputes. What I learned made me angrier than I'd been in years. Karen had been running a complete scam. There was no legal HOA in our neighborhood. No votes had been taken. No official documents had been filed. She had simply printed up some fake letterhead and started demanding money from her neighbors. But here's what made it worse. Several families were actually paying her fake fines. Mrs. Patterson down the street had given Karen $400 over 6 months for various made-up violations. The Johnsons had repainted their house because Karen told them their color wasn't approved. Karen had convinced these people that she had legal authority over their properties, and they were too scared or confused to question her. I decided right then that Karen's fake government was going to end. But I needed to be smart about it. First, I documented everything. Every time Karen came to my door, I recorded the conversation. Every fake fine she issued, I photographed. Every threat she made, I wrote down with dates and times. Second, I researched the law. I learned everything I could about HOA formation, property rights, and fraud statutes. I wanted to be absolutely sure of my legal position before I made my move. Third, I started talking to neighbors. Not to complain about Karen, but to ask innocent questions about the HOA. When did we vote on this? Do you have copies of the bylaws? Who audits the finances? What I found was that most people had the same questions I did, but nobody wanted to be the one to challenge Karen directly. She had created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation that kept people quiet. The fence incident started because I needed privacy in my backyard. My neighbor to the east had installed security cameras that were pointed directly at my deck and windows. It wasn't malicious, he was trying to protect his property after a break-in, but I didn't want to be on camera every time I stepped outside. I got the proper permits from the county, hired a licensed contractor, and built a standard 6-foot privacy fence along my property line. The fence met every building code and setback requirement. It was perfectly legal. Karen showed up the day after the fence was completed. "Mr. Chin, we need to discuss your unauthorized construction project." "What's unauthorized about it?" "I have all the permits." "Permits from the county don't override HOA architectural approval requirements. Any fence over 4 feet requires board review and written consent." "Karen, there is no HOA board. There is no legal HOA at all." "That's simply not true. The Brookhaven Hills HOA is a properly established community organization with full authority over architectural modifications." "Prove it." That's when Karen made her second mistake. Instead of backing down or admitting she was wrong, she doubled down on her lie. "I don't need to prove anything to you. I'm issuing a compliance order for immediate fence removal, plus a fine for unauthorized construction." She handed me another fake citation, this one for $500 plus daily penalties until the fence was removed. "Karen, you need to stop this. What you're doing is fraud." "What I'm doing is protecting community standards. Your fence violates multiple safety and aesthetic guidelines." "What safety guidelines?" "Sight line obstructions, emergency access limitations, and pedestrian safety concerns." "That's ridiculous. It's a backyard fence. It's a threat to community welfare, and I have the authority to address it." That's when I knew Karen was never going to stop on her own. She had convinced herself that her fake authority was real, and she was willing to fight anyone who challenged it. Over the next week, Karen escalated her harassment campaign. She put flyers on every door in the neighborhood warning about the safety hazard my fence created. She organized a petition to demand its removal. She even called the county building inspector to file a complaint. The building inspector showed up, looked at my permits, measured the fence, and told Karen it was perfectly legal. That should have been the end of it. But Karen couldn't accept defeat. She started calling the police with noise complaints when I mowed my lawn. She reported me for suspicious activity when I worked in my garden. She claimed my fence was attracting criminals and lowering property values. Most of the cops knew Karen by now and treated her calls as nuisance reports. But she kept calling, kept complaining, kept insisting that my fence was somehow a threat to public safety. That's how we ended up with Officer Johnson in my driveway on that Tuesday morning, and Karen getting arrested for filing false police reports. But the story doesn't end there. Karen's arrest was just the beginning of the investigation that would expose the full scope of her fake HOA operation. When the police searched Karen's house as part of the fraud investigation, they found boxes of forged documents, fake legal papers, and detailed records of all the money she had collected from neighbors through intimidation and lies. Karen had been running a sophisticated scam for 3 years. She had collected over $18,000 in fake fines and fees from 17 different families. She had forged county documents, impersonated government officials, and even created fake websites to support her claims of authority. The most disturbing discovery was her problem residence file, detailed profiles of every neighbor she considered non-compliant, including photos of their properties, records of their daily activities, and plans for enforcement actions to bring them into line. My file was 3 inches thick. Karen had been documenting my every move for months, looking for violations she could cite. She had photos of my garbage cans, my car, my landscaping, even my mailbox. She had been planning to escalate her harassment campaign until I either moved away or submitted to her authority. The district attorney decided to prosecute Karen for fraud, extortion, and impersonating a public official. The evidence was overwhelming, and several neighbors agreed to testify about the money they had paid to her fake HOA. Karen hired a lawyer and tried to claim she had been acting in good faith to protect the community. She insisted she really believed she had legal authority and was just trying to maintain neighborhood standards. But the prosecutor had her own forged documents, her own financial records showing where the money went, and her own written plans for expanding her fake government to control more aspects of her neighbors' lives. The trial was a circus. Karen took the stand and spent 2 hours explaining why every one of her actions had been necessary to protect the community from people like me who didn't respect authority. Mr. Chen's fence was just the beginning, she testified. If we don't maintain standards, if we let people do whatever they want, the whole neighborhood falls apart. Property values drop, families move away, and before you know it, you're living in a slum. The prosecutor asked her to explain her legal authority for collecting fines and issuing citations. I was elected president of the HOA by unanimous consent of the board. What board? The founding board members who established the association. Can you name these board members? Karen rattled off 4 names, people who later testified that they had never agreed to form an HOA and had never elected Karen to anything. Did you file any paperwork with the county to establish this HOA? The paperwork was delayed due to bureaucratic issues. So there are no official records of this HOA's existence? The records exist. They're just not filed yet. Ms. Martinez, isn't it true that you created fake documents and forged signatures to make people believe you had authority you never actually possessed? I had moral authority. Someone needed to protect community standards. Someone needed to, so you appointed yourself? Yes. That answer sealed her fate. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Karen guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay full restitution to everyone she had defrauded. Her house was put up for sale to cover the damages. But the best part was what happened to the neighborhood after Karen was gone. Without her constant harassment and fake rules, people actually started talking to each other again. We had a real neighborhood barbecue for the first time in years. Kids played in the streets without their parents worrying about violating some made-up regulation. The families who had been paying Karen's fake fines got their money back through the restitution order. Mrs. Patterson used her $400 to plant a beautiful garden that would have given Karen a heart attack with its non-compliant colors. The Johnsons painted their house bright yellow just because they could. And my fence? It's still standing exactly where it should be, protecting my privacy and blocking absolutely no sight lines except for the one they used to let people see into my backyard. Sometimes I stand at my kitchen window in the morning, drinking my coffee and looking out at my peaceful yard surrounded by my perfectly legal fence. I think about Karen in her prison cell, probably still convinced that she was the victim of some conspiracy against proper community standards. The thing about bullies is they always believe they're the hero of their own story. Karen genuinely thought she was protecting the neighborhood from people like me. She couldn't understand that what she was really protecting was her own need to control other people's lives. But property rights are property rights. Laws are laws. And fake authority is still fake, no matter how many official-looking documents you print up or how many times you practice your speech about community welfare. I learned that sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is just to let them keep escalating until they cross a line they can't come back from. Karen could have stopped at any point. She could have admitted she had no real authority and backed down. Instead, she called the police and tried to have me arrested for building a legal fence on my own property. She filed false reports and made fake claims until she finally committed crimes that real authorities couldn't ignore. These days, our neighborhood is actually the kind of community Karen claimed she was trying to create. People keep their properties nice because they want to, not because they're afraid of fake fines. Neighbors help each other because it's the right thing to do, not because some self-appointed president demands it. And when real issues come up like the stop sign petition or the street light repairs, we handle them like adults through proper channels with real authority and actual democratic processes. My fence has become something of a neighborhood landmark. People drive by just to see the fence that brought down Karen's fake empire. Some of the neighbors joke that it should have a historical marker. Here stood the fence that ended HOA tyranny in Brookhaven Hills. I keep the fence well maintained not just for privacy, but as a reminder that sometimes standing your ground is the only way to protect everyone else's ground too. Karen Martinez thought she could intimidate me into tearing down my fence and submitting to her fake authority. Instead, she ended up tearing down her own life and submitting to real authority in a real courtroom with real consequences. Justice has a way of working out in the end, especially when bullies get so confident they forget that their power was never real in the first place.